Markets may be reacting to the data, but maybe to the idea of a new Fed board on the way with an 88%, that is 89% higher than it was before, probability of a first cut in September, 48% for a second cut in October. So kind of toying with maybe it happens in October, more sure of with the 85% it happens in December. The result of the data was to boost the CNBC Moody's rapid update tracking forecast for the third quarter to 3.3%. Pretty healthy, showing the economy and inflation accelerating amid, curiously, calls for Fed rate cuts, Courtney.
Very interesting stuff. Steve, stick with us. We've got more to talk about. And my next guest noticed that discrepancy, too. He actually says if it weren't for Trump's pressure on the Fed, we would be talking about potential rate hike. So joining me now is Ed Mills. He's Washington policy analyst at Raymond James. Steve Leisman, obviously, still with us, too. Ed, I find this very fascinating and highlighted this part of your note. So make the case. If it weren't for sort of the noise around what's going on with Lisa Cook, you think actually cuts should be off the table and we should be looking at hikes. Is it because of the inflation data, looking at 2.9%, well above the 2% target rate?
Yeah, Courtney, to be clear, I'm not calling for hikes. I was just making the point that markets are at record highs. Yesterday, we had a fantastic labor report. Today, we have a inflation report that is, in line with expectations, but well above that 2%. I think the Fed is sighing a bit of relief that it didn't come in with a 3 handle because that would be really difficult to argue. But the Fed is a consensus-driven body. We know that there are at least 2 members, soon to be 3 members with CEA head Stephen Marin going to get confirmed, that are going to be pushing in favor of a cut. Now, if Lisa Cook's gone, that's 3-3. Maybe she actually is there and is pushing for a cut. So that's probably 4-3. We're moving in the direction of a cut. But a lot of this here is because of the political environment and the policy environment that is set by President Trump, who clearly thinks that a cut is necessary. And so I do think the Fed is going to look at this and say, from our power and preservation of our power perspective, it makes sense to do this in September.
Wow, it's all just very fascinating. I mean, Steve, you sort of brought this point up when we're looking at the strength of the consumer when you were going through the data that was released today. I continue to be surprised. I mean, retailers more or less have said, we're going to have to raise prices. They're not really telling us exactly where they're doing it. I think they're trying to escape the ire potentially of the White House. But nevertheless, the results have been better than expected, Steve, and consumers are still spending. Does that surprise you? And do you feel like there's a point at which when inflation rises to a certain level, and we've been seeing it time after time, that's it. It breaks the consumer. What are we waiting for?
No, I don't think it surprises me, and I'll bet it doesn't really surprise you, Courtney, because we both know that pricing is a conversation where I say, I'm going to charge you more, and you say, no, that's too much, and you say, how about this much? And you say, okay, I can do that, and it's a back and forth here. Especially as time goes by, though, you get to the point where I think companies are not going to be able to hold the line on that, and I think that's going to be sort of the key point here. Either one of 2 things will happen. Either the price will rise to reflect the true costs of retailers protecting their margins, or they're going to have a decline in the sales, and it will hit consumers either in the thing that they have to buy, because, even though it's 15% more expensive, or they go to buy something else or nothing at all. It's going to be something that's going to happen over time. I will say, though, the interesting thing about the way I would divide up the Fed is, and I think Ed was sort of right on here, you've got the committed cutters, and you have some committed no-cutters. Then you have some folks in the middle. I think that's what's going to rule the day here, Courtney. The folks who are saying, you know what, I'm not really sure if we should cut or not, but because we're X amount restrictive, I can go a little bit below that and still be putting downward pressure on inflation. That was my impression of John Williams, who I interviewed earlier this week. Not really all that gung-ho about cutting, but he thinks he can do it and get away with it. And whether or not the politics has some say in that, I think that's an interesting theory.